So yeah, getting this thing started. Give us a little bit about what the Temple of Akasha is all about and what inspires you to create behind that.
So, Temple of Akasha kind of evolved from my original offering or my original sharing, which was Undefined Life, and that was kind of my first attempt at trying to just be visible with my own perspective on my journey and what I was learning with regards to awakening or remembrance. And then at some point last year, I recognized this urge arising in me to start shifting from this less defined, I would say almost kind of maiden like view of the world to a more solidified, anchored, embodied take on my spiritual journey. So I'd spent probably 7 years prior to that really on a more transcendental journey, having gone through a very intense Kundalini awakening and a lot of I would say a lot of kind of really ungrounded experiences. And life was teaching me to start descending the consciousness that I'd accessed into this human experience instead of trying to escape it. And Temple of Akasha was kind of born out of that descending journey that I'm now on, of really trying to take everything that I learned, I guess, from Undefined Life, of being just exploring consciousness, exploring spirituality, so to speak, and then actually taking that and beginning to take all of those fairly abstract concepts, ideas, experiences, and anchor them into something tangible so that we can start to bridge the human and spirit. And Temple of Akasha is, I think, my soul's kind of the divine feminine signature of my soul expressing, and that is the portal through which I do it, or I'm attempting to do it.
I think you're doing a pretty good job.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so it seems like you went from an undefined life to a more defined life, so to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's kind of that paradox, right? Because we can never actually conceptualize or contain the essence of who we are in any one notion, construct, word. And yet simultaneously, I'm finding that the more embodied I become, the more anchored I am in this sense of my essence, which is uncontainable and undefinable, and yet somehow even more assured. It's a paradox.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm finding. And Undefined Life was very much me in that seeking state, both seeking the existential experiences and existential understanding, but being very ungrounded in that seeking. And Temple of Akasha is a more, not suggesting at all that I have the answers, but just a more assured sense of the journey that I'm on now.
Yeah. Well, you've probably come to find that in one way or the other, the human experience is a creative experience. Right? Like we are, through your creation, and other people also have creative abilities as well, but through your creation, you've probably come to find that, like, in the midst of your creation, that you are just innately a creator. You know what I mean? Like, it just kind of flows. Like, it's just like something that just happens. I believe that every single human being has that. Like, every single human being has some kind of effortless flow of creation, whether it is making YouTube videos, baking cakes, making houses, writing books, whatever it is. I think every single human being has some kind of innate creative purpose here. And I guess it's up to us in our own accord to be able to find that. Yeah.
I agree. And I think actually I'd never, ever considered myself a creative person. Growing up, even into adulthood, I never, my stepsister and I are similar in so many ways, but I always considered myself the more intellectual academic, one of the siblings. And she was always to me the very creative one. And I'm realizing, as you said, in my own exploration, that our ideas around creativity are still so limited and conditioned to, you can only be a creative if you're an artist or this or that or the other. But actually, I'm finding that creativity is just the natural outpouring of our beingness. Like, we're kind of creating whenever we're not really locked into the realm of the mind, because creativity is innately innovative, and it's innately a kind of, there's an innate novelty to creativity. So it happens in the beingness, in us just being and flowing with what feels right. And there's no right way to be creative. So it's funny that you say that, because I still don't consider myself a particularly creative person, but to me, I make videos and YouTube content and stuff mainly because I just love it. For me, that is my way of being creative. I'm not an artist traditionally with a pen or a paint board or whatever, but I do love this process.
Yeah, it's a new kind of creation, that's for sure. You're a content creator, right? But it's also more than that. It's more than just that label. But yeah, it's a different time to be alive in terms of creation, because we all have the ability to create something, and we all have the ability for others to view the creation pretty much for free. I mean, yeah, you do need some kind of technology, but it's unique. It's definitely a unique time to be alive in terms of creation, but also many other layers and levels. Yeah. So what do you how do I put this? I was gonna say, what do you create for? But maybe a better question is like, what do you create about? Like, how do you what's the message you try to convey to people?
I think that's changed over time. I think before I was trying to communicate, I suppose that there is actually, on some level, I think I was trying to communicate that I'd figured it out. I think a long time when I was creating from Undefined Life, there was this sense that I thought I'd figured it out. There was a lot of spiritual ego attached to that kind of phase of my experience, in that I thought I'd figured out the spiritual path. And I think I've been really humbled in the last few years, and recognizing and really having to become aware of my own egoic spiritual, the spiritual ego structures in my consciousness. And I'm realizing that there is no right way. There is no right way to do this human experience. There is no right path. There is no right way to live. A person doesn't have to be spiritual. To me, this whole experience is innately spiritual. It's energy collapsing as matter. Like, we can't disentangle the two. So it's like there's no right way. For me, the content I'm sharing is just to hopefully inspire people to connect to their own knowingness, their own heart's wisdom about what feels right for them and their own way of living. And actually, it's really kind of the antonym to the message that I had before, which was like, I think I know the way. And now it's like, I don't know, but you know. Your innate being knows. The innate being awareness within you knows. Not like this knows. So, I mean, I don't tend to plan content. I film and I write on Instagram whenever there's an inspiration. I've tried to be formulaic with my content in the past, especially with Instagram. It just doesn't work for me. It's empty, it's dry, it's hollow. Again, if we're talking about this being a kind of more creative process, as opposed to something that I'm doing with a practical or pragmatic goal, to me, it's dry, and it lacks the heart, it lacks the juice of creation if I'm doing it for any other reason other than to create, and to create from a really kind of like pure space. So I think the message is really overarchingly one of empowerment, or that's what I'm trying to convey anyway, that we can be, as someone that has been through a really like tumultuous experience of what it means to be human, as in within my own internal landscape, like 10 years of really severe mental health issues. I want to convey a message of empowerment, that it's possible to liberate ourselves from our stories, narratives, and the self-imposed chains that we find ourselves bound by. Whether that comes across, I don't know, but that's what I'm more and more anchoring myself towards. Just let your heart lead the way. And really, I think, as I'm sure you're aware, we're moving into this age now, Pluto in Aquarius, Saturn in Pisces. We're in these kind of astrological periods now where we're moving away from certain paradigms or people having dominion over what it means to be, like, what the right way is. And I think that I went through my own process of having to witness my own spiritual ego and then beginning to unpick and dissolve that. And I think that this is what's going to continue to happen within our community as well, recognizing that no one person has the way. To me, this human experience is almost like a buffet. We get to pick and choose in each moment of our unfolding beingness what feeds us. And I'm realizing in my journey that things that fed me and nourished me 2 years ago can now be a limitation. And actually things that didn't resonate 2 years ago that I did not connect with, I could not find any kind of resonance at all with, I'm now ready for. So I think for me, it's just this continuous unfolding of recognizing that we are fluid, flexible, adaptable, organic beings, and there is no right way to do this journey. Just keep listening.
Yeah. Well said. That's good. Yeah. I find that the journey or the path is it's really about what's best for you, like what's truly fulfilling for you. I like to think that we have not only like a food diet, but like a whole energetic diet. So in terms of, you know, the media we consume, the people we hang out with, the food, yes, but just everything that we intake, it contributes to what we output. You know, we're like an input output machine in terms of our energy, almost like we're like a membrane in a way. So I feel as though the path that not only you and I are on, but other people as well at this point, it's refining that. It's refining the input so that we can output a little bit better. You know,
Yes.
that's a very simplified model, obviously, but I think that's kind of what's going on right now is we're just figuring out what's good for us, you know, and that's how we
Right.
create a better life, and then ultimately, ideally, in this new age, we're moving toward create a better world, you know. But yeah.
Yes, I really love that. I really love that. Yeah, that resonates deeply with me because I think understanding how to be effective and impactful with my energy and to really become refined, that's the message I keep getting whenever I'm kind of creating content and whenever I'm connecting to guidance. It's always about refining what it means to be a conscious human, refining this technology, right, that we have, this kind of multi-dimensional technology that we have access to. We've been operating from we could say like a really kind of basic operating system, and we're going through an evolutionary process now that's upgrading that operating system, that's kind of bringing more aspects of our being online. Are you familiar with human design? Have you explored it as a system? Or
not really. I've heard about it and people have given me the like what my design is, and I thought it was quite interesting and actually quite relevant, but I've never really explored too much about it. Yeah, why? Do you know? Is that one of your things?
Well, that's just, I'm by no means an expert, but it's just something that has really helped me with regards to what we're talking about, with regards to energy management and becoming more effective with our energy type. It's really supported me because I've been really highly sensitive my whole life to energy, to the degree where I can feel EMF radiation. I can feel 4G. I can feel Wi-Fi coming from devices. I can also feel, I don't know if I'm going to mention that here, but I can also feel what I assume is the protein being shed from those that have been.
Don't say the V word. I'll have to bleep that out. Seriously, actually, I had one of my videos. Yeah, I had one of my videos get taken off because someone was talking about that.
Okay.
This was a video from last year, from like a year and a half ago. It's wild.
So we'll say the jab, or I'll just
just.
I mean, I don't necessarily want to go down that rabbit hole, but it was just to say, like, I'm so sensitive to energy to a degree that has, for most of my life, been overwhelming and so disempowering. And it's like, how do I function in a world where no one seems to even acknowledge that there is like an energetic undercurrent to all of this, where that's really what I feel first. That's the kind of language that I communicate in and understand most kind of most natively almost. And so human design has supported me to become a little bit more aware of my I'm a projector in human design. So we are typically more we have like open centers, so we tend to be more absorbent of our environments and the energies in our environment, and that to me has gone some way to explaining my sensitivity to energy, and then also helped me to understand my role energetically and why I was never able to maintain the 9 to 5 momentum of generator types, of like the 70% of the population who are here to just, I don't want to say be the worker bees, that's not to be demeaning, but they are the ones that are here to build, to create. I like to call them like the marathon runners. They're here to do in a consistent way. They're the doers. And people with my energy type, the projectors, we're like the sprinters. We're here to do short bursts of quality work or sharing or contribution, and then we need to rest, otherwise we get really burned out. And so human design is just one of the ways that you can understand that. But for me, that's been like a really helpful thing to understand that, I actually, from an energetic perspective, I do function differently to, a lot of the people around me, which would explain why I can't emulate other people's way of being, and I'm not supposed to.
Yeah.
So what, out of interest, do you remember what you are?
If you said it, I would know.
Manifesting generator?
That's it. No, wait. What, isn't there like 4?
There's reflector, projector,
yeah,
manifesting generator. I believe they're the 4 main types.
I think it was manifesting generator, to be honest with you, because I remember it was like 2 words, but I'm not 100% sure, to be honest with you. But what does that mean?
It depends on the kind of there are kind of finer characteristics of each of the aura types, but manifesting generators are supposedly subsets of the generators. So you still have more defined energy centers and motor centers, which basically means you have more sustainable kind of flow of energy in your body. You may not need to maybe rest as the projectors do in this kind of start-stop fashion. Yeah. Your aura type will tend to like your aura type is way more no, it's not. Your aura type is more, that's why. So your aura type, the manifesting generator aura type, is a bit of a weird one. The generators are really open, the projectors are really like focused and penetrating, so we're really good at like getting deep with people. Manifesting generators can be a little bit like they're kind of hard to pick. It's almost like they're supposed to just float through life doing the things that they love, and they catalyze things happening in the world. They kind of they get things going. They're the catalysts. But they can, as I said, depending on certain features of their profile, they can operate a little bit like projectors too, like my design type. So they can be a bit of a blend of both the generator and the projector, depending on your characteristics. I mean, I've looked a lot into generators and projectors, and the others are not so relevant to me because I'm not really here to serve people that aren't. I either serve the projectors or I serve the generators, and you're kind of both. But yeah, it's it's like we got to take these systems with kind of I say a pinch of salt to see what feels relevant to us. But I found a tremendous amount of relevance in that, married with, because it is kind of a combination of astrology and the chakra system. It's an interesting fusion, and I found a lot of wisdom in it.
Yeah, that's what I thought was cool about it. It was like a model within models. It was like there was models within that model, as in like you said, the astrology and chakra system. It's pretty cool. Yeah, but either way, it's just a model. At the end of the day, you got to just go with what your heart says, what you feel. And you felt that you were different from a young age, right? You said, and feeling energy, that's different. It's almost like a sixth sense,
Yes.
I've always had that as well. I've always felt like, I just read things differently. And I don't mean like read as in like literally reading. Like I could just read situations and people and events differently. It's almost like a form of omnipresence. Not quite though. Not like, not quite omnipresent, but it's like, touching upon that. It's just like seeing and feeling life a little bit differently. It's quite peculiar. But yeah, I've always had that as well. Just being
how do you receive that in your body or being?
That's interesting. It's just more intuitive. It's like before say somebody says something, or before I see something, it's almost simultaneous to that, but just like another layer to that. So like say somebody is saying something, I can see what they really mean, you know, or I can feel what they
Mm,
really mean, or even if it's just like I don't know. And I can feel music differently too. Like music is very, very poignant, very, very powerful. I always felt like I hear music differently than other people. Like I think it's more like for me, it's actually very auditory. I don't know how to explain it. Just
mhm.
like sound is a lot different to me, and you know, when people speak, obviously that's sound. So I can hear people's words. I can hear their soul in a way. It's
Yes.
very strange. But yeah, it's just something that I've always had and been able to tune into the world a little bit differently through that. Yeah,
Mm.
it's like a superpower. I usually try to keep it on the DL, don't really talk about it much, but it's the same thing. It's just being able to uh I don't know, just feel outside the five senses, you know, have like the sixth sense, like I said, and interpret the world a little bit differently within my being. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. And I find, I mean, I this is not to be hierarchical in this, but I tend to find more in the work I've done and clients I've worked with, the more evolved the soul, the more access they tend to have to these less conventional abilities or skills. And I believe that every human has the capacity to open to their multi-dimensionality.
yeah,
But depending on how far along the person has in terms of, you know, coming into contact with their true nature, with their own exploration, being their deconditioning process, will allow them to access those abilities or not. So yeah, I think a lot of I don't mean evolved, you know, I'm sure you know what I mean, but I don't mean evolved in a hierarchical sense, just those that have maybe been on the wheel a few more times,
yeah,
you know, and have had to refine their consciousness through their incarnation journey. They have learned to hone or cultivate these kind of extrasensory abilities. So that's interesting that you see that, because I think really what we're what I feel in this evolutionary journey, as the kind of veil thins between the world of spirit and the human experience, is that we are those of us that feel the non-physical or the energetic. Really, what we're feeling into is the organic nature beyond matter, right? So
yeah,
maybe, as you said, a person is speaking certain words, they're saying something, but really what we're feeling or hearing is the actual kind of organic energetic signature of their expression.
yeah.
Is what they're saying truth? Is that I'm the
Hmm.
same as you? I can usually, within myself and others, detect how much they're in an egoic consciousness, how much they're in contraction versus how much they're coming from their hearts.
Hmm.
And it's not really what they're saying or how they're presenting physically. It's really that energetic undercurrent that there's a signature behind the physical material presentation.
Yeah.
um
Hmm.
that's interesting. That I mean, I'm not surprised by that with you, but it's just interesting that we
Yeah.
all have our unique way to read this world.
Yeah. Interesting choice of words with signature. I like that. There's a signature behind it, like a vibratory
Mm.
signature behind things,
Yes.
where it's like beyond. Um, yeah, it seems like it's in layers, you know, and the material level seems to be the grossest layer. Seems to be
Yes.
the lowest layer. I mean, maybe there's lower ones, but it seems to be the ones that we can interpret is the material level being the lowest, and there seems to be at the higher energetic levels, they're present, but it's not quite seeable or hearable. It's like you have to tune in differently, and yes, see the
Yes.
signature comes in simultaneously, but yet you might miss it if you're not quite present enough, or if you're not quite refined enough in your being. It's the Yeah, it's
Yes.
peculiar. It's peculiar. And the thing is like nobody
Mm.
teaches us that that's a thing, or nobody teaches us how to really go about that and have these CDs, as one may call it. It's
Mhm.
I don't know. It's a interesting time to be alive, because we're finding out what it really means to be a human being, and maybe we all have these special innate abilities. I don't know. It's just I don't know what else to say. I'm kind of at a loss for words, to be honest with you. But
Mm.
it's just a peculiar time to be alive, because we're really figuring out we're figuring out what this whole organism, this mechanism of the human body is really about, and it's way more than we've been told.
It is.
It's
It's
way more than we've been told.
vast.
Yeah. And I
It's
think it's just
vast.
getting started. That's the
I
thing.
agree. I
The
agree.
party's just starting.
And it's funny because that what you're pointing to there, that experience of the multidimensionality of life, that
Mhm.
really came online after my Kundalini awakening. And that was something that I think perhaps I always had some degree of contact with, being fairly clairsentient and feeling the world quite strongly energetically. But that multidimensionality, the layering of the
Yeah.
present moment, became even more strong after the Kundalini awakening in a way that was so, because again, we don't have any training, there's no education around this. It felt so like
Yeah, overwhelming.
bamboozling,
Mhm.
yeah, to the human. It's like, so I'm in the present moment, but simultaneously to what I'm experiencing physically, there are these other dimensions, there are other qualities to the present moment that I'm feeling into.
Yeah.
And what I'm learning to do now with my menstrual cycle, what I realized, one of the gifts of being a woman that has a menstrual cycle and that goes through this cyclical, almost like vision quest every single month, is that during the times of bleeding, it acts as a chamber to really descend into that, the feminine pole of my consciousness, which is the oracle, which is the connection to spirit, which is the connection to the non-physical. And I notice that it's not every single month, because I can't always drop in. It's such a subtle level of being that I can't always drop in if I'm not fully present and I'm not fully attuned. But every month I'm using my menstrual cycle as a way of descending into this multidimensionality, so I can really feel like the fullness of the present moment. And it's in that beingness, like I'm starting to use that as my guide to like see how orientated to truth I am, like how
Mm.
orientated to truth in my being have I been, how much have I allowed myself to get attached to a certain way of being this month. And this month has been a real challenging one, so I can feel
Wow.
like I haven't been able to drop in, and I can feel that I'm then clinging to like more of an egoic layer of consciousness rather than really accessing what I feel to be the true kind of expansive nature of the soul's intelligence.
Mm.
So it's an interesting. I feel very honored in that way, being a woman. It's a very interesting journey each month.
Yeah.
It can be.
It can be. That's quite interesting. Yeah. I feel like a lot of people don't talk about that. The differences, because obviously there's differences, and especially in today's world, we don't like to recognize the differences between the sexes. But there's definitely a difference in the journey of the human experience, but also probably in the spiritual experience of the human, in
Yeah.
terms of just what happens in our bodies and the differences in the organs that we have, and how that contributes to at the energetic level, at the vibratory level, like how that contributes to how we decide to digest the world and interpret the world. And
Mm.
I don't hear a lot of people really speaking about that. But
Okay.
there's definitely got to be differences, and even though there's probably a lot more similarities between the path and the spiritual journey, there's definitely got to be differences between a man and a woman. There has to be drastic differences in how we interpret this spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Honestly, I've
that's
never
something.
thought about that. I'm glad you actually brought that up. I've never really,
I
yeah.
feel, for me, I'm someone that has really been schooled through a very intense soul connection with a man, and so I've been really learning um, about the polarities of consciousness, which are obviously not assigned to just a person's biological sex or gender, but they tend to be, masculine consciousness tends to be more prominent in a male, generally speaking,
Yeah.
and the other kind of side to that is true. And so I'm really becoming very aware in my own lived experience of the innate differences that we have. And I think that they're important and necessary. And I mean, this is a whole other topic that maybe we won't get into today, but I'm really wary of and against actually the homogenization of humanity, which I see playing out as part of this strange, absurd kind of kind of path that humanity seems to be taking when it comes to identity and when it comes to trying to understand our humanity. and trying to, it's almost like in trying to find equality and trying to find like an honoring, we've decided to just homogenize everything. Yeah. And because we can't seem to find respect in binaries, we can't seem to find respect in polarization. And so I think like there's a higher frequency to what it means to unify. And then the lower frequency expression of that is the homogenization of humanity in a way that doesn't actually regard our natural differences, and just tries to bypass them, as opposed to include them in the human experience as necessary. So it's, and we've got the whole transgender thing, and we've got all this kind of just identity politics unfolding. And to me, it's like, I'm very, very passionate about it, but for me, it's very, very potentially dangerous, especially for younger generations, to not be taught that there are innate differences and that that's okay. And that those innate differences don't necessarily define our being, but they're a part of our experience. And it's like, how can we learn to express our innate truth within the vessel that we've been assigned? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a very deep and complex conversation, that whole journey. But
yeah, I think you said it well though. But yeah, that is a rabbit hole in itself. I do ultimately believe it's destructive as well, because our differences are beautiful. And it's like we're being told that our differences are not beautiful. And yeah, we are becoming, I don't know, it's like unconsciously homogenized, even though it's probably deliberate. It's probably deliberate at one level. There's probably some kind of strange agenda behind it, but ultimately, I don't know how or why or where it comes from, but ultimately I do think it is destructive, because we do have innate differences, like God-given innate differences based upon, maybe one would say, karma. And if we ignore that, that's only going to dig our hole even deeper. Right. So yeah, I don't know. I think that's just one of the growing pains we're going through right now, because the thing is, it's like we are figuring out that we do have some kind of sense of similarity between us. We're figuring out we're all one, we're all in this together. Yet it seems like on the other side of the coin, we're going about that in the wrong way. Like the right way, in my opinion, should be, we figure out we're all one, we're all in this together, we're all in the struggle with our differences, not try to like negate the differences in that. And I don't know. Yeah, you know what I mean? It's only going to bring 100%. About more just noise and just stuff that people don't need. It's a lot of bullshit, to be honest.
I feel like you and I are on the same thread, because I feel exactly the same, that like what I was saying about the higher expression of this unification is an acknowledgement of our oneness at the deeper level, right? Yeah. And what I think is playing out is the immature shadow, if you like, expression of trying to be unified in our experience. So for me, it's almost like humanity is going through a maturation process with our evolution.
Yep.
From being almost juvenile with our consciousness. And so just as we would when we're transitioning from like childhood to teenage years and teenage years to adulthood, we have to trial and error. We have to experiment. We'll often go through kind of polarizing experiences to feel what it's like to move beyond our comfortable parameters. And I'm noticing with many things, like our relationship to food, the vegan movement being like an extreme swing the other way to mainstream kind of meat consumption, for example. The same thing when it comes to identity politics. It's almost like the pendulum is swinging away from the conditioned, conventional, normal standards in a juvenile, I don't want to say juvenile to disregard those movements, but it's like the collective's kind of immature attempt to find harmony and unity, but it's not the highest expression of it yet. It's like we have to go through these swings in consciousness to feel our way. This is my embodied journey anyway. It's like I've been schooled through polarity. It's like I swing from one thing, I go to the other embodied experience, and I feel what those things feel like in my body. And then I start to understand, well, that doesn't feel good in my body. That doesn't feel like truth. That doesn't resonate. Neither does that. And then you go somewhere in the middle and you start to find your own personal sense of balance. And I think humanity is going through the same thing, the
Yeah.
swinging of the pendulum, where we've gone through, like, on some level, the collective is aware we're on an evolutionary journey. We're all part of that evolutionary journey. And so it's like the collective is finding its own way of expressing that. And its initial attempt to express that is like, there are no genders. The fact you have a penis doesn't matter. And it's like, we're getting there. We're getting to this place of like, okay, we're understanding we're more than maybe the physical body.
Yeah.
Like because I studied English language and journalism at uni. So I'm fascinated by, people's people wanting to kind of innovate language when it comes to like pronouns and things like this. Because to me, I'm both highly, in some ways, like what's even the point? You're trying to contain the essence of who you are in a language which is inept at doing that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'm also seeing like, oh, this is humanity's attempt at trying to break free of maybe these really binary, restrictive standards that we've imposed on ourselves based on kind of the mind's, structures, right? And egoic ways of being. So it's like, I see that we're trying to innovate, but for me, it feels like we're not quite hitting the mark yet, but it's like, we'll get there. It's just a bit of a roundabout way.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, if you want to get back to the layers thing, it's almost like it seems like humanity is going about it at the wrong layer when it should be at the energetic consciousness level. We're trying to change it up at the material level when it doesn't work like that. That's a backwards way of thinking. It's like you change your consciousness and then the material follows suit. When it seems like at the material phenomenal plane, we're trying to do that here first. And that's what's immature about it. That's what's kind of unwise, you could say, about the way that's, I think the intentions are pure. I don't think anybody's really trying to, it's not like, malicious but it could be destructive. That's the thing. It's like, the path to hell was paved with good intentions, right? I think we've all heard that one. So I think the intentions are pure behind what people are trying to do with this, the whole transgenderism movement. And also like to say, I've never spoken about this, so this is quite interesting for me to touch upon this topic. So yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. But I think the intentions are pure, but I just don't think we're going about it in the right way. And it's just happening so quick. And yeah, I don't know. We're going through a lot of changes. I guess we could sum this up as humanity at this point in time. It's a interesting time to be alive. And we're going through so much change so quick, like so much novelty in such a short span of time. And I don't think it's like we're able to, we are able to, but we're not used to this change in such a exponential span of time, exponential change in such a short amount of time. And it's just, I don't know, it's just tough for us to digest. I don't know if the human brain is, if you're not on the path per se, is quite fit to be able to deal with these changes. So it's just causing a lot of conflict, whether it's through people, whether it's internal conflict. It's just a lot of conflict right now. But I think ultimately that conflict is going to bring about a sense of harmony, and that's just, for some reason, that's how humans learn. That's how we learn. We learn through, we find harmony through conflict. For some reason, we have to know what we don't want in order to know what we want. We need to have a sort of sense of imbalance to bring the balance in a way. That's just, for some reason, how this reality works. Through the yin and yang, you gotta find the dance between the two, and then in the dance is the balance. So I think that's what's happening right now. It's a peculiar time where we're just, the balance is just, it's just every day that goes by, it's finding some kind of equilibrium somewhere. Hopefully at the end of the rainbow, we'll find the equilibrium. We'll come out the other side a little bit more balanced. But I don't know what else to say. I think that's the tumultuous times that we seem to be living in, the chaotic times that we seem to be living in, I think ideally, ultimately, are going to bring about a more balanced and harmonious time that I think is more aligned with our natural state. And I think it seems chaotic and tumultuous and imbalanced because we've been so off our rocker for so long. Like, we've been just living in such an unnatural state. So us coming into this sort of newfound state, which isn't really even newfound. It's a remembrance of what it really means to be a human being, is ultimately
Mm-hmm.
going to be messy because we're reaping our karma, one could say, and
Yeah.
in that shedding of the layers is just a lot of stuff that we have to go through, and that's at a personal level. Like, I think
Yeah.
anyone can attest, the dark night of the soul is very similar. We have to,
Mm.
when we're really remembering who we are and shedding the layers and the whole spiritual path, it's quite messy, right? It's not really the easy route per se, but it's worth it. So I think, at a collective level, the same thing is happening. It's like a collective dark night of the soul, I believe. And then
Yes.
ultimately, I think we're going to shed these collective layers and come out the other side, and hopefully, ideally, um, be a more harmonious people. I believe that. And not only do I like believe that on a surface level, I feel that, like, this is gonna sound corny, but I feel that within my heart. Like, I feel like that's just happening at this point. I don't know how else to put it. It's just like I feel like humanity is just going through this collective refinement that is, ideally, I know I've said ideally plenty of times, but I truthfully believe that we're approaching this like heaven like state. And it doesn't seem like it, but I do believe through the chaos we're going to reach a sort of harmony. I don't know how long it's
Mm-hmm.
going to take, but I think we're going to
Mm.
get there. Do you think we'll get
Yeah.
there? Like, do you think that's what's happening right now? It's like we're building a better world, a better people, a better collective, a better human experience, you could say. Do you think we're doing that?
I think that that's a potential. I think that's a potential experience. Um, I mean, it really depends on what school of thought or even like what sense you're approaching this from, because, there are, if you look at like the yogic system, there are suggestions that we're living in the age of Kali Yuga, right? And we are in the kind of the, this is the disillusion of humanity. This age is marked as the disillusion of humanity. But maybe that, we could see that as being destructive and perhaps something that feels really negative. But actually, based on what you've just said, actually, I personally believe that this process of mess and chaos is the process that we move through in order to then be rebirthed into a more evolved kind of collective state, or at least that's the potential. What I think with humanity at this stage, I feel is that there's just, by the way, I'm going to just say this and like put a voice to this. I've got a lot of third eye and crown activation speaking to at the moment. So I'm trying to just like stay in my body. I'm not entirely sure whether or not I'm supposed to channel something right now, but I'm trying to like stay in my human experience and not get too connected to that. But it's just based on what we were saying before, it's a really interesting experience where I'm like, there's stuff coming through, and then there's also the human that's trying to like do human things. So if anyone noticed that, like I just had like a bit of like a weird wobble thing going on with my eyes and stuff. But anyway, like what I feel for humanity is like, and maybe you've seen this in videos I've spoken about. I don't know if you watched the content, but I feel into the evolutionary process like a spiral, and it's like if we look at a spiral kind of wider at the bottom, and then we've got the kind of peak point at the top, we're moving from duality to singularity, right? And so to me, the evolutionary process is a refinement of that. And so the ideal experience is that we move to a place of an embodied understanding of the singularity, right? Of the oneness, of the
Yeah.
harmony, the harmony, the unification of our consciousness. But in order for us to do that, as we're being schooled on the earth plane through duality, that's part of the lesson of being here on earth. This is really what it's for. We get schooled in duality. That's how this realm works. And so in order for us to, as you said, come back to kind of a state of natural balance, we kind of have to go through these extremes, which look chaotic. Whether humanity, because we've been through these cycles before. We went through this with Atlantis. We went through a really big evolutionary upcycle, if you like, and we didn't quite make the grade. to be able to utilize very advanced technology in a way that was going to benefit the species. And so we saw the dissolution of that civilization. And I think that I feel deeply that humanity is at a similar choice point now, where when we're looking at things like AI, and again, we're in Pluto and Aquarius, so we're looking at like the real, very quickly now, with the next 20 years, we're going to see very radical shifts in technology, in the way in which we're operating as a species. Do we have the ability to hold that level of technology and that level of advancement in our consciousness at this point? I would say no. And it's funny that we're kind of onto this topic, because I was really thinking about this earlier when something came up about AI, and it really got me thinking, like, for us to be able to utilize the level of intelligence that's available with the AI in a safe way that's actually going to advance the species and not destroy it, we need to have a certain level of consciousness that's not driven by the egoic consciousness. It has to be driven by a wisdom and understanding of the capability of AI, right? And so that we can balance the infinite potential of AI with this kind of groundedness of our humanity, and this recognition that this is something that maybe we can utilize for good, but without, again, like a child, right? If we're not a child or a teenager going through their own process of exploration, something that has, like a car, if you're driving a car, you can drive a car safely, you can drive a car recklessly. It's like, how are we going to choose to operate this technology? I don't feel that the collective has, at this particular moment, the level of consciousness needed to hold AI in a safe way. And so I see like multiple timelines potentially for humanity, but I am choosing to embody what I feel is my highest potential, and to pursue that for myself, and to connect with and create communities that envision the same, knowing that we are just aspects of the whole, hoping that then creates a kind of a vibrational wave into the collective that supports our ascension in an organic, nourishing way. But I do think that we really are at this tipping point where it could go either way. It's very possible that, as Kali Yuga states, we could be seeing, this whole age suggests that we have descended essentially into kind of like the most kind of heavily identified state of consciousness possible with the ego, and therefore the most removed from our truth. And this is a really dangerous place for humanity to be. When we get cracked open by what's coming for humanity in the next couple of decades, because there are going to be really massive, I feel, very big shifts for the collective: financial collapse, possible alien intervention. Like, there are going to be things that I think could rock the collective. And it's like, during that cracking open process, are we going to allow that cracking open of what was to birth a new potential, a new state of consciousness within the collective, or are we going to descend and devolve? So it's like, who fucking knows? I mean, we've got to sit back and just grab the popcorn and see what happens, really, because it's just what a wild time to be human.
Yeah, to say the least. Yeah, it's like a test. It's like a big test, and humanity has yet to pass the test.
Yeah,
so it seems like, and we've tried plenty of times, it seems, in the past, and we haven't got the message yet.
We have not got the message yet, and
what do you think is the message? What's the message?
What's the message? Again, it's almost like, for there to be a message, there'd be a sender and a receiver. And maybe the actual point is that there's no separation. There is no sender and receiver. There is just the isness. Like, maybe that's the point, to recognize, like, to move from the idea that there is a separation.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like to move into the embodied state of unity, which is my path. That's the path that I've been schooled on within my own experience and within certain connections I've had. It's just coming into harmony within. And for me, that's what I feel is being asked of the collective too. But it's like, there is if I mean, I don't want to say that I don't have faith in humanity, because I've personally evolved very quickly in a short space of time. It's possible for humans to evolve quickly. And I think that the events that are going to come for humanity in the next couple of months, years, decades will force humanity one way or another. So it will force humanity's hand. Like, are we going to choose to use these events that are coming to catalyze growth and to really begin to embody our potential? Like, as you said, suffering, chaos tends to be a prerequisite for growth. Are we going to utilize these experiences, or are we going to collapse under the weight of them? So I don't know. My hope and my intention for my life and my experience is to embody the heaven frequency, is to embody that frequency in the vision that I'm sure you and I and many like us have. We see the potential for humanity to move beyond a very move beyond the animal programming, move beyond the animal, purely identifying with the animal body, which is one aspect of the human experience, but not the totality of us. And it's like, for as long as we're still operating from the animal programming, right? Like territorial, egoic consciousness, because the ego is inherently intertwined with the physical animal consciousness. For as long as we're in that space, we will never be able to create the heaven realm here on earth, or at least embody and anchor it. Yeah. So it's like, can we? Someone that I watch a lot, a chat from, I think it's called Golden Shadow Astrology now, I'm not sure, someone who talks a lot about human design. He talks about there being three parts of the human. There's like the animal, the human, and the angelic. It's like there are these multiple facets to our consciousness, and it's like coming into harmonious balance with all of them, not disregarding one, not favoring another, recognizing that we are a marriage of all these different aspects. And that's certainly what I'm realizing in my own journey now. It's like, like the things that maybe I shunned years ago on my spiritual, like the spiritual seeking part of my journey. I was really seeking the angelic, I was seeking the cosmic, I was seeking the transcendental. I'm realizing now that was only half the picture, because I was denying the innate feeling, the innate expression of the body, the innate movements that come with what it means to be anchored in a physical body, with a biological system, right? With a nervous system that is responding to its environment. And so how can we descend that loving, angelic, aware consciousness into the human experience, into the animal body? That to me is the marriage and the opportunity.
Yeah, amen to that. I think that's what's happening right now. I feel as though we're at a transitional stage in our evolution. We like to believe that evolution has ended in a way. Like, this is it. We got it all figured out. We have the internet. We have AI. We have Google now. This is kind of it for our being. But no, like I said before, I think the party's just getting started. And I think really what's happening is that we're transitioning from that animal. Like, the animal, we were off balance for years, and we're transitioning from that animalistic behavior, the animalistic instincts, the very territorial, egotistical, just way of being, and then we're finding out that we are actually part angel. I think that's what people on the path are finding out about themselves. But ultimately, I think we're all going to find that there's more than meets the eye. There's more than just the body, I guess you could say. There's more than just the wants and needs of the body. And we're finding out the angel, the spiritual, is used to balance that out. It's used to I guess find a more sense of a sovereignty. So the body, the ego, doesn't quite call the shots so strongly anymore.
Yes,
we can respond differently to just all the stuff, all the noise that comes up, all the conditionings a little bit differently. But like you said, we're not negating it. It's not like completely getting rid of it, because we're still, for as long as my vantage point is in this body, and I'm gonna have those animalistic instincts. It's just gonna happen. We are animal. We are part animal. But I think it's like, recognize and respect that, and then respond differently. And that's our place right now. It's like, we're not quite, even though as much as you want to be an angel, right? As much as you want to be this very high being, we're not quite there yet. So if you try to be something you're not, that's only going to cause more distortion in how we act in
Mhm.
the world and in how we feel ultimately. So yeah, it's know where we're at right now. And I think knowing where we're at is knowing that we're in this transitory period. Like evolution is not yet done. We're still, maybe our angelic future is true. Maybe we will be these like light beings. I do actually believe that. I do believe we're gonna somehow morph into this state of consciousness that is truly unfathomable, but I'm gonna try and speak about it. uh it's like this, it's like this being that is, we slowly like metamorphosize, I guess you could say, out of the body and more into a state of consciousness still, but it's like less gross. And what I mean by
Yes.
gross is like less material. Like we're
Yes.
just slowly getting there, but we're not
Mhm.
quite there yet. So like
Yes.
we got some stuff we got to work out. So it's like, I guess, keep that keep that in our heads, in our hearts, in our souls, and let that lead the way. And slowly over time, over lifetimes, will become that angelic being. But like if you try to do that now, it's only going to cause more distortion, because we still have to work out how to be a human, you know, how
That's
to
why we
be.
came in, right? That's why we came into these human bodies, so we could experience like and
Yeah,
express. Like that's one of the things I've realized, that this human experience offers the angelic, you could say the angelic consciousness. It's the ability to be embodied in all that it means to be in physical form, all the beauty and all the pain, right? Like the
yeah,
richness that is offered in being a human, I don't think is actually can be matched in any other plane in terms of the richness of experience, right?
yeah.
Because there's so much polarity here. And what I'm finding on my own journey is that just choosing to seek the existential or the angelic, we do bypass the human needs, the human expression. And actually there is a real, like there's something very satiating about, for example, let's say anger is an emotion that I have experienced a lot in my life, that I'm moving through a lot. I'm moving through a lot of like really dense childhood experiences that were really unpleasant, and there's a lot of anger arising in the recognition of those experiences. And anger is something that just as a society, we just don't know how to hold anger. We don't know how to
Mm,
hold and make space for anger. We have created a kind of a sense that anger is wrong, that anger should be contained, and that it should be denied. And actually, I'm realizing that anger is a gateway to us reconnecting with our personal sense of power. And so the balance is being able to both honor the animal that wants to express anger, because to me, anger arises when a boundary has been overstepped. Anger arises as a sign to take action when something feels invasive in an unsafe way. So
right.
we need anger. And at this, as you said, for as long as we're in physical bodies, as long as we're anchored to a physical plane where there are potential threats to our existence, we need boundaries. We need to be able to understand that there's a difference between you and I and someone who's driving a car at 60 miles an hour who might like crash into this human body and like destroy it, right? We need some degree of singularity, a healthy sense of singularity, which is what the ego gives us. If we're entirely identified with that, what happens is we become reactive, as the animal does. We become like locked into that reactive sense of consciousness, right? Our emotional responses drive us.
Yeah, yeah.
And so the angelic consciousness gives us the opportunity to love and hold and space for the animal expression without being consumed by them. So
Mm-hmm.
now, like I'm finding in my journey, and to me, this is the feminine way. This is the feminine honoring like the feminine consciousness, which is expression, which is what we've been really severely lacking in our collective consciousness for thousands of years. It's been denied, repressed, oppressed, which is why to me there's so much imbalance. And it's so this emergence of understanding that our expression is not wrong, but it's also recognizing that what moves through this human, the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, not to attach to them, just to allow them to be. As we know on this journey, it's the allowance that is powerful. Can I allow this anger without resistance or without attachment to it? Can I allow it to just be a natural outpouring and recognize that in the movement of that energy, there'll be an emergence of something. We're making space for something. It may be grief and sadness that usually hides, or shame even, that hides or lies underneath anger. So it's just allowing without judgment. And this is where the kind of existential work, this is where the spiritual work comes in handy when we're dealing with the gross stuff.
The gross stuff.
And the gross, mundane stuff.
Yeah. And I feel like in that allowance, the recognition, the allowance, comes a different response. If I get angry, maybe if I wasn't wise enough, I'd respond in a way, depending on the situation, but I'd respond more violently, or I would respond by saying something I don't want to say. And I feel like when we become a little bit more wise and we recognize the energy, like you said, that's moving through us, we let it move through us a little bit differently and less destructively. I don't know how else to put it. Like, it seems just like the whole path is about being able to just respond differently. It's being able to digest the energy a little bit differently, so that we're just, I don't know how else to put it. I guess, more wise in the way that we act with the world, so that we hopefully make a more conducive life for ourselves and everybody, I think that's what it's about, because I don't know what else would it be about. Like, I think ultimately it's like we're becoming better people. So we have to, I don't know, become these like energy conduits that is just more fluid. But it's like it's hard to explain, because we recognize without judgment, but then there's also still our body still responds in one way or the other. So I feel as though a path is a combination to that point of response. It's that point of reaction or responding. Do I respond violently, or do I respond in a way that is I don't know, it's just quite different, just a little more peaceful, a little more loving. I feel like that's really what this comes down to, is being able to have that split second discernment in whatever moment, whatever the circumstance or the situation is to be able to come into that and respond differently. And I think that's how we change the world and change ourselves. It's in those little moments, and those little like the speck of time where you can come into that and have that response to say, am I gonna punch this person in the face, or am I gonna respond a little bit differently? Maybe punch a punching bag or something. Obviously that's just a crude example, but you know what I'm trying to say. It's being able to just change how we feel, change how we judge it, but then also ultimately change how we act with the energy.
Absolutely. Reacting, they said, this is, I guess, spoken about a lot in this community, the reacting versus responding. And that's what awareness gives you, the opportunity to respond as opposed to just react. And so, and I think that's a really good example with something like anger. When we get triggered, which we often do in kind of relationship, it's like we're going to get angry at times. So it's like, do we spew that anger, which is usually just kind of an unconscious projection, something much deeper within ourselves? Do we spew that onto the other, or do we check in and say, okay, there's a lot of anger arising right now. If we recognize that our orientation point is love, that is the angelic potential. And I think you and I both feel that. We speak about love a lot, that the kind of orientation point of this experience is love. And that's what we're being asked to evolve towards, to embody. So if that's the orientation point, is me spewing anger onto this person the most loving choice, or is the most loving choice to take space, to acknowledge my anger, and to not to deny it, to suppress it, because we don't want to harbor that level of energy in the body. I've seen the destruction for myself, what it does when we try and contain these really big energetic, emotions, but we allow that to move in whatever way it needs to move. And then we come back to the dynamic from a less reactive place. So it's, I think ultimately for me, this whole experience, we're being asked to, like, how much love How much love can we bring into this life?
Mm-hmm.
How much love can we bring into what it means to be human? How much can we let love hold what it means to be human? You know, and that is the place I've landed at in my own experience of going through a lot of polarity, is recognizing the only thing that can hold this human experience is love.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that's big enough to hold everything that it means to be human and what is experienced here on earth is unconditional love, and not the love that we're obviously conditioned to know and experience, the Disney romantic, which I would argue is more of like an attached, codependent love, but like an unconditional, boundless, loving presence. That is the only thing that can hold all of this experience.
Yeah, I think that's truly what we're here to learn how to do. Is to love through our suffering. It's
yes.
It's like throughout the darkness and the turmoil of our life, can you love? That's the test. And I feel as though we're always tested. It's like, can you love in this moment? Can you love this person that you think isn't you, that you think is so separate and different than you? Can you love them in this moment? That, you know, and I think a lot of it has to do with forgiveness too. Like, can you forgive? Can you forgive this person? There's a lot to it. And obviously it's love beyond the concept of love, and love beyond the symbol of love. It's hard to explain, yes, but I think that's really what we're here to do. And that may seem like the biggest cliche in the world, and yeah, we've spoken about it plenty of times, but I really do believe it's the truth. We're all here to become embodiments of some kind of loving force. And that's quite beautiful, right? It's quite beautiful. That it's not about fear. It's not about competition. It's not about that general angst that we all feel with each other. It's not about that whatsoever. Really, behind the scenes, it's about love.
Yes,
it's quite beautiful. Like, you know,
was
there a moment in your life where it just hit you that's what this whole thing is truly about? It's truly about love, and maybe you could even say God is love. Like, was there a moment when that that revelation dawned on you and you had some kind of epiphany?
That it's all about love. I would say, are you familiar with the twin flame journey? I mean, there's a lot of this that floats around in the spiritual community, and there's a lot of misconceptions around this path. But I have someone in my journey that I would consider a twin flame, someone that has been brought into my experience as a mirror, like to move in a very specific container that is schooling us both in how to be embodiments of love. And I would say that in my connection with this individual, because of the polarity and the karma that we initially moved through, like when I met this individual, that was the first time that I experienced God through another person.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah, that was the first time that the love that I felt for this individual, and it was beyond attraction. It was beyond a knowing of the person. It was an expansion of the heart where the person became an actual portal for me to experience the divine. Damn. And so that connection has, for me, more than anything, actually, but more than my Kundalini experience, this connection has truly helped me to come to this realization that this is what we're here for. It's to both experience like the undeniable heavenly bliss that comes with having an open, loving heart, and being able to hold ourselves and another in love, and to be able to exchange that, to give that, to receive that. Like it's heaven, but also being able to, maybe an eyelash, like being able to hold, like during those times of intense suffering, as you said, being able to hold that in love. Like that's where the real growth happens. That's where, for me, this for me is where the embodiment has started to come in. It's like recognizing, like, can we love all of this? And for me, this is self-love also. Like, this connection, and then simultaneously the work I've had to do on myself as a result of it, it's really helped me to understand what self-love really means. And self-love, even, like, you know, obviously there's so many connotations attached to that. And for me, it's just, can we embody that loving presence And can we let the container of that loving presence, which is non-physical and so is kind of a holding space for this human, can we let that loving presence hold what it means to be human, what we're experiencing it as the human, which can be really, really painful. And I know in my own experience right now, since the eclipse portal last October, my life has been wild. Like in terms of my internal state and the stuff that I've moved through, the content I've moved through. And this is the first time in my life where I've gone through real depth of content, like really very, very deep childhood trauma, which a year ago, 2 years ago, would have completely like crushed me. Actually, like I would have been unable to function, unable to work, unable to do anything. Yeah. The thing that has changed is my ability to hold compassion and love for myself and for all of the human tumultuous stuff, and to not judge any of it as wrong, to not attach to any of it as being my identity, and to just love it all, and not like in a, you know, in that state. And to me, actually, like if we're trying to, with language, contain like what does unconditional love mean, to me it's like radical acceptance. Mm-hmm. It's an accepting, like that's the closest like synonym, I guess, for unconditional love to me, is an acceptance, not resignation, but an acceptance in this present moment of all that is. Yeah. And to me, it's like when we bring that kind of presence to our experience, like we can truly like begin to, we can truly move through this human experience with like, with a wisdom and with a knowingness that we will be okay regardless of what it is we're experiencing, because we're holding ourselves. Love is holding us. God is holding us, whatever you want to say. Yeah. So I don't know if there was an acute moment for me where that knowingness dawned, but I would certainly say that in connection with this other being, there has been like the recognition that like love is like, when the heart explodes with that kind of love, it's like, well, Jesus, like love is it. Love is the way. Love is how love is the way.
It is. It's so true. Yeah. Oh man. It's such a beautiful dawning to know that that is the truth. And, you know, we can say it, but saying it doesn't do it justice. Like truly feeling that and having this just intuitive knowing of that. Oh man, it's like a blessing. It's like grace.
Yes.
And even if like somebody said, Gary, you're crazy. What do you mean? Love is the truth. Look at the world, man. It's so dark. Like there's no evidence per se that could take that away from me, you know, to know that love is the way. There's nothing that can take that away. And that, yeah, that's grace. That's a blessing. Like no matter what, no matter how dark life gets, no matter what happens in my life, you can always come back to love, man. And I know this may seem a little cringe, may seem a little corny, but it really is the truth. And I wish I could give that to everybody. You know what I mean? I wish I could just give love to. I mean, I guess you could give love to everybody, but that dawning, you know, like that knowing. I wish everybody could know that it's gonna be okay at the end of the day, right? I wish we could really all know it's gonna be okay, but it's not that easy. It's not that easy, you know? But it really is. It's true. I mean, just, I know my words don't do it justice, but for you and for anybody listening, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay no matter what. We are held in the hands of the God of love at all times. We always were, we always will be, and we always are. And it might not seem like it at the material level, but at a deeper level that goes beyond words and goes beyond visual and auditory phenomena, we are somehow held in this boundless, eternal, loving force.
Yes.
It's beautiful. It's quite beautiful knowing that. It's almost like a sense of immortality, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's so beautiful, Gary. I mean, I feel like that is it. Like that, and that is, I think, actually perhaps the gift of us being on our journeys at this time and being able to connect with and contact that knowingness or that gnosis of love. when we have connection to that, for me, it's like when I've had a tangible connection to that. And when I continue to be connected to that, it's like, this is what drives me. It's like, well, if I can go through, like, you know, at times I was suicidal, and if I can go through experiences feeling completely hopeless and giving up on life, and to then come back to love, and to know that it is going to be okay, that beyond my conditioned responses, beyond my fear, beyond all the stories, that there is actually a presence, there is a love that's holding all of this, and I just have to allow that presence to just be with me, to be in my experience. It's like, I think the reason that we feel this as we do in this moment is so that we can, in our own unique way, gift people with experiences that will help them access that knowing too. So maybe us just being in that state in conversation with someone helps them to access that vibrationally, you know. And then maybe whatever else we do in our world that we feel guided to do, you're doing your podcast, which I've no doubt is activating people in their own way. The work I'm doing, the work that many others are doing at this time, it's like, in our own unique way, once we connect with the knowingness that love is the way, it's like we will find our own unique way of helping other people to activate that and access that within their being. And to me, that's what drives me on. It's like knowing that for myself, knowing how much love can hold within my human experience. To me, there's no way that love couldn't hold what's happening for the collective right now. We just need enough humans to embody that knowing, and then the scales will tip. And I think that is what the awakening is. That's what's going on with the collective awakening right now. Like, I'm seeing so many light workers, if you like, people who are here to access and embody that unconditional love frequency first, right? To have that knowing, that contact with it in the felt sense perspective, like to know that, and then to start being in the world from that place. And then that is how we shift this. It's kind of like what's that analogy, or like the 100 monkeys on the island, like when do you know what, I can't remember. I'm like, it's like a vague thing. It's like there's like a tipping point. There's a tipping point that I think will be reached vibrationally when there's enough of that anchored here in the human. And I say, you know, I was speaking earlier about the doom, the destruction, the potential disillusion into like apocalyptic conditions, because we're just, you know, there is a lot of ego identification, but I also see a tremendous amount of love being accessed by people in the world, you know. And it's like, through the adversity, love is the only thing that can hold it all. When you look at natural disasters and things that happen in the world that are really painful, what is beautiful that comes out of those experiences is how much the human is moved to show love, to give support, to nourish one another in times of hardship. And it's like, love is the force that binds it all together.
Yeah.
So it's like, we're just doing as much as we can in each moment to come back to that. And for me, this human experience is really like about deconditioning from all the stuff that obscures that knowing in the heart. And I'm realizing for myself, because I'm moving through some intense stuff, and I can feel at this moment in my lived experience, my heart isn't open fully. There's a lot of guarding here. I usually can tell because I'm very normally connected to nature. So I went out into nature today, and the nature's beauty didn't seep into my experience as it normally does. And so I know that there's like a kind of wall around my heart and how much I'm really feeling life. But it's like, and I think when we get into that space, when we're disconnected and the heart's closed, people give up, they fall into depression, they fall into like helplessness, hopelessness. And I guess what I want to share with anyone listening, if they're in that space, is that it's the consistency. What we're being asked to do in these spaces is to be consistent with our practices, consistent with choosing to orientate towards love even when we don't feel it, choosing to orientate towards faith even when we don't feel it. And actually, like, to me, what I'm seeing in my experience is the thing that's shifted for me in the last 6 to 8 months is being consistent with the stuff that I know reconnects me to truth, even when I'm in like fog, even when I don't feel, and like, even when I don't want to get up and move my body, even when I don't want to meditate, even when I don't want to like express how I'm feeling because feeling pain is uncomfortable, honoring those things that truly connect me to the truth of who I am. that creates the pathway back to ourselves in those moments of disconnection. And it's the consistency that gets us there.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. That's so true. I don't even know what to say that. That was well said. Yeah. Be in the world, not of it. Be in the world with love and not of the world. Yeah.
What connects you to love, Gary, like in your lived experience?
That's a tough one.
There may not be any one thing.
Yeah. I mean, just generally doing these things with people, you know, I feel like having these kind of conversations are very loving, but also regular conversations as well. I just like connecting with people in one way or the other. And it could just be, you know, at the coffee shop saying hi or holding the door for somebody, telling them to have a good day. It's just general connection with another point of consciousness and actually like recognizing them as much as I can in the moment as just a living being, a living soul. That's like my test. It seems to connect with love is to truly connect with love, like right in the moment with another person. If I can do that, if I can at least attempt to, that's how I feel I connect with this loving force. It's just with other people, you know. But I don't know. I guess other than that, other than in the moments in my interactions, general meditation, just being able to find that center, you know, just breathe, find that center, know what's real. Meditation is so useful. Also, I mean, magic mushrooms help me connect with love. That's for sure. They have in the past, at least. If there's one thing from the external that has opened me up to the internal world, it's psilocybin. And I think anyone that has tried psilocybin can attest to that. That opened me up to the realization of love. Psychedelics I will always revere for that. They opened me up to the idea of love within myself. So there's that. Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one, and honestly, I feel like that's a whole conversation in itself. Like, what opens us up to love? That's a deep one. Ideally, like you said, yeah, everything could be everything. Every single moment could potentially open me up to love, but primarily it's interacting with others and truly in whatever situation, whatever circumstance may come about, being able to see into them, see through, not through them, because that sounds like that has a negative connotation, like I see through you, but it kind of is. It's like seeing through the facade of the body and like seeing their soul. See if I could do that in whatever moment, and getting rid of any kind of bias that I may have toward a person based upon what they say or how they talk or how they look or whatever kind of, you know, what's that called? Yeah, when you judge somebody, like judging a book by its cover, you know, I try to get through that and just actually be with somebody in a moment. That's what connects me to love. That is love. I feel as though it's to really just truly be with somebody. For they could be talking about the dumbest thing in the world, you know, the most like mundane, like something I don't even truly care about, but just truly listening to somebody. That's my test of love. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I feel like, isn't that what it's about? Because I think I've noticed this, like in the spiritual community, we can kind of I think we can almost want to make these experiences kind of exclusive and like, oh, I'm going to bring love to like this particular soul dynamic or like to this particular like ceremony. And it's like, or to my healing space or whatever. And it's like, we've got great teachers that have walked before us, like Jesus, like who there was no social media profile. There was no, there was no, like, he was out there being the embodiment, walking, talking embodiment of love. And he was doing that with the people that crossed his path from every walk of life. And it's like, is that not really what we're here for? To just, can we bring that consciousness into our experiences? And that is predominantly relationally, right? Like that's most where we're tested. And it's funny that because in my projector profile, like for human design, I have a hermit line. So I do tend to really want to be quite reclusive. And I also have another line which is really like social. It's a bit of a kind of like a war within me sometimes. And it's funny that many times I've kind of glamorized in my mind this idea of just being really reclusive and almost like, I call it monk on a mountain syndrome, like wanting to kind of just pull back from the world, the chaos, the drama, the pain, and just being in my own experience. And it's like, but actually, aren't we here? Aren't we here to be able to pour this love into our life and into the experiences, and to allow that love to fuse with whatever it is that's unfolding? And we can't do that if we're isolated. We can't do that if we're in hermit mode, away from the world, choosing not to engage. And it's like, I think that that's the biggest test for light workers right now. It's the tendency to want to pull back from, because we feel the pain of the world so acutely. And it's actually like, can we bring the love that we feel innately in our hearts into this experience? Can we? That's the biggest test and opportunity right now. And I think that's I think you said it beautifully, that it's relationally in the everyday moments, not exclusively for one person or one experience. It's like with the stranger on the street. Yeah.
Because I think, speaking from personal experience, I used to judge things like, this isn't spiritual. They're talking about sports. That's not spiritual. I don't want anything to do with it. But really, one can come to find that everything is, quote, spiritual. This whole experience is a spiritual, divine experience, no matter how mundane or just unspiritual it may seem. Truly, every single moment is a divine moment. So I guess that's what I try to do. I try to revere every moment, no matter how unspiritual it may seem. It seems to be that's the test that I'm going through at the moment. It's like, how can I just appreciate the divinity in everything, even the darkness, even the stuff that doesn't seem so spiritual on the surface level. It really truly is.
Yeah, I feel that very deeply. I feel that's something that I've also had a lot of bias and tendency towards, that labeling, judging. This isn't spiritual. That person isn't spiritual. This conversation isn't spiritual. And it's like, when we're in that mode of consciousness, we're still in separation, right? We're then perpetuating the very thing that we're claiming to want to. Right.
That's the irony.
Yeah.
Truly, Earth, I feel as though we're gonna slowly find out it's a giant sangha, and we're all on the path. We're all spiritual, no matter what. And we're all, it's really like the only difference is if you know it or not at this point. Like, if you know that it's spiritual or not, that's really that's the difference. But even then, there really is no difference. But that is, if we want to try to concrete a difference, it's like, if somebody truly knows that Earth is it's like an ashram and we're here to learn something, and some people don't know that. But I think eventually, I think we already talked about this, eventually I think we're all going to wake up to that and realize that we are in Earth school here. And we are still growing. Just some people at this point know it, some people don't, but we're all on our own path. We all have our own way of going about it. So it's up to us right now for us to recognize that, we all have our own way of going about this, and to not judge anybody else's path, because there is no anybody else. Like, I guess that's what you can kind of come to know as well, is that, like, even though they might not know it, it's like, it's still God in drag, as Ram Dass would say, So I don't know. That's something I'm working through personally at this point. So how can I truly just be with all the stuff, especially living in the 21st century in the Western world? There's a lot of stuff that doesn't seem quite divine, quite spiritual. So how can we work with that and stay equanimous in our being? That's how I figure is my path right now. I don't know.
Very well said.
I'm just thinking out loud.
It's funny that, like, what you said, reminds me of a visual that I was shown a little while ago with regards to like the nature of consciousness, almost being like an octopus. And so we are the many tentacles. And so the tentacle can feel like, if we just focus on the tentacle looks individualized, but actually it's connected to an entire being.
Yeah.
And it's like, so it's like the paradox of being both the singularity and like the duality at the same time. It's just a kind of, it's an and both situation.
Yep.
We are both the individualized expression, and we are also the expressor, if you like.
Yeah.
The creator and the creation.
Yeah.
Are the one. So
I like to say it's like I'm the one, but you're also the one. So who's the one? Everyone. Just think of that, how that is spelled. Everyone. Everyone.
Yeah.
Oh,
wow.
Man. Etymology.
I know.
Yeah.
Incredible.
That's the dance. That's the paradox that we have to weigh. It's don't get sucked too much into I'm the one, I'm God. Because like we are all God. But it's like, yeah, well, you're God too. So it's like, you're not that special.
Right.
So it's about take that essence, still revere that essence, and bring that into the sense of individual expression. And I feel as though true non-duality, and a non-dualist would probably argue with me at this point, but I feel as though true non-duality is this like, it's this back and forth of the paradox, which is really one. There is, I know, may seem contradictory in how I'm speaking. There really is just one. The absolute and the individual is just one, but I feel as though in our being we express the one in our individual. So it seems like two, but it's not. It's not two. It's non-dual.
Yes.
I don't know. It's hard to explain.
I'm with you because again, it's like we're in the physical 3D earthly reality where matter presents very much as individualized, right? Like there is that individualized expression, but from what we were speaking about earlier, you and I both sensing beyond the physical and having this kind of innate capacity to sense beyond, like into the energetic. Like we look at the energetic being like kind of an infinite field that binds the matter into being. It's like the individualized expression of what we're seeing in the physical could not be possible without the energetic underpinning it, and that energetic is a singular field in its vastness, so it's like it's and both, which is just it's mind-blowing. It's kind of mind-blowing to consider.
It's just something that we can feel. If you try to think about it too much, it doesn't work like that, because just it goes beyond thought. It's that if we go back to the layers thing, it's beyond comprehension in a way. It's beyond thoughts, beyond rationale. Like that and both wavelength is truly just something that we feel and that we embody and that we become.
Yes, it's an embodiment. And that to me is like how we, when we're looking at kind of like understanding God, if you like, as a force, as an intelligence, it's like this to me is where words, paradigms, systems fall short. It's like there is no way to know God with the mind.
Yeah.
Right. There is only the experience, the lived experience. And so for me, this is why there is no one religion, there is no one system, there is no one philosophy that can ever truly claim to have dominion or monopoly over God, because God is cannot be contained by concepts, cannot be contained by ideology. It's not bound to an ideology. It's beyond all of that. These are all constructs and all limitations, which is just the opposite of the true nature of God. So it's like we can only know this force through direct experience and direct contact, which again, what to me is why the embodied path is so important, because it's like we can get so far with concepts and ideas and models which are helpful, but it's really the lived experience that gets us into that felt sense place where we really begin to understand these things we're speaking about from the felt experience and not just as concepts.
Amen to that.
Mm.
Did you ever use the word God or have any belief in God before this whole thing? Like in your earlier years of life, would you have considered yourself atheist or maybe even agnostic? Like, did you even say God? Because personally, I didn't. I never even thought of anything like God. I thought it was all just nonsense. I was like, what are these people all on? Like, what do you mean, God? Don't you see the world? Haven't you turned on the news? You know?
Mm.
So,
Mm.
but now I use it pretty openly and I have no shame about it. So,
Mm.
that's huge. Yeah, even though it is truly unfathomable, you can't truly talk about God. That doesn't make any sense. But I do still use it as like a door to the divine mystery. You know, something that we are involved in that goes beyond any of the five sense phenomena, like just a general sense of wonder and mystery. And I know even those words don't do it justice, but I think you can kind of grasp what I'm getting at. It's just like we're part of this
Absolutely.
eternal mystery of that God, love, infinite consciousness, source, the Tao, whatever. A lot of different labels. But would you have even entertained that concept before this whole journey?
So I was raised Catholic.
Okay.
So
So yes, but
uh,
a different way.
so my
Yeah.
understanding of that intelligence of that force was very different coming from that experience, from that
Yeah.
background of being raised Catholic. And I remember as a child, I remember having like almost like an existential crisis at maybe 6. I was
Wow.
very fascinated by space as a child
Mm.
and the stars. So I had a bunk bed that I would just kind of peek. I was right next to the window and I would pull the curtain aside and I would just stare at the night sky. Every single night was my favorite thing to do. And I would consider my smallness in it all, and I would just consider like it really seeded, I think, for me an existential crisis, because I would start to think, but it just goes on and on and on and on. So what's the point? What's the point of me, this tiny like ant,
Yeah.
this like grain of sand? And so being raised Catholic, I think I did not have any felt sense embodied experience of God. I remember only one experience as a child where I was in church and there was the same regurgitation of scripture as it
Yep.
was every single Sunday. And I was looking through a stained glass window, and the sun was shining through this window. And I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. And I remember crying at how beautiful it was.
Mm.
And that felt like a holy experience to me. Again, something really simple where there was no particular moment where, it wasn't anything particularly significant, so to speak, but it felt very sacred, just being in contact with that felt sense experience of beauty, of love in that
Yeah.
moment. But beyond that, my experience of God was, God is a man on a cloud
Mm.
who likes to punish when we sin, and because there are good girls, and then there's the bad things to do. And it was just to me, I think the conditioned understanding of God from a very, very limited perspective, and that's the view I held for a long time. And then I think I moved to an agnostic position where I don't think it was ever going to be part of my beingness to be disconnected from the force of all creation. But there was a skepticism, like heavy skepticism around what that was and whether there was anything at all. And then I went through very dark, deep experiences with depression, which led me more towards the atheist side of being agnostic, like really kind of giving up hope that there was anything. And then, the light shines. There is always a dawn after those moments of darkness, and slowly but surely those experiences began to crack me open to deeper meaning. They forced me into finding deeper meaning in life, and
Yeah.
slowly I began to make contact with that lived experience of what we might call God. And I'm realizing in my life, like, again, I think this is the church programming. There can be like, we can think that in order to have communion with God, or to be able to experience and embody that intelligence that there is some sacred one. There is one moment where it's all going to just like, it's going to be like sacred, and then everything is just like the heavens will open, and it's
The
like
hallelujah
actually
moment.
the hallelujah moment, and it's like actually it's just, it can be felt and experienced in the most mundane of experiences at the physical level.
Yeah.
There is no one way, there's no one condition. And so yeah, now my understanding of God is, I think, similar to your own, and very, very different and very divorced from what I used to think. And I think I find it very interesting. This is something I was actually going to ask you about, because I've seen within my own personal network, and I've seen within the wider spiritual community, people moving from what you could call New Age spirituality back to Christianity. I'm seeing this movement a lot. Are you noticing this?
Oh yeah.
And I'm wondering, like, I'm very curious about this. I like to try and understand from the inside out what a person's embodied experience is, to have taken them from a more perhaps expanded way of viewing consciousness back into this kind of back into this system, so to speak, of religion, or of viewing the world through the lens of religion. And I'm curious about like that. Do you have any sense of what is driving that movement?
Probably because those religions and traditions they're already established. They already have like a framework for one to reference. And I do believe if one goes through the New Age philosophy in the correct way, you can approach the framework of traditional religion in a different way, where you can see the truth in that. Because I do believe they have been corrupted over the years, but I do believe they have a fundamental essence of truth behind them. Like I do believe Jesus, he'd be considered New Age back in his day, I think what he was saying is the same thing that we're trying to say here. He just used different language, and it was 2,000 years ago. And among many other masters of other traditions, the truth is the truth, and the wise call it by many names. I really do believe that all traditions, I believe there's really only one religion, and all of these other religions are trying to culminate that religion in their own way, in their own culture, in their own framework. But ultimately, there is truth, right? But you can never describe it, like we said. So it really doesn't matter what symbol, what language you want to use to describe it. It's just whatever resonates with you, I guess. Whatever symbol you want to use to remind yourself of your own innate divinity, then go with that. As long as you don't mistake the symbol for what it's really trying to show you. The finger pointing at the moon example that I'm pretty sure everybody has heard before. There's plenty of different fingers. There's plenty of fingers pointing at the moon. So traditional religions are just very they're just very archaic, and I guess what's the word I'm looking for? They've just been around for a while, so they're easy to reference. Like they're easy to go to with the keen eye. If you know how to approach it with a keen eye, you can feel the truth in the words with the right interpretation. So that's why I believe. I mean, personally speaking, I've come to understand Jesus's word a lot more recently. Like I used to be like, what's up with this Jesus guy? Like, who cares about him? But now I understand where people are coming from with it, or at least where Jesus is coming from with it. If you truly know like what he's talking about, it's like, oh, that makes sense. And it's just got distorted over thousands and thousands of years. When he said, I'm the son of God. Well, yeah, but it's like, I think he was trying to tell everybody else that they're the son of God as well. But we got lost at him just saying he's the son of God. So now everybody thinks he's like the incarnation of God, like this perfected being, which maybe he is. That could be taken as another interpretation. But what I'm trying to say is that like it's people are going back to those because there is an essence of truth in traditional religions. And you can understand it if you already understand that within yourself. I think if you know what they're trying to say, you know what they're trying to say because you've actually embodied that. Like you actually have that essence of truth, that kernel of truth per se within yourself. So when you do approach whatever religion it is, you just approach it differently.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it just, you ultimately don't need it, but it's up to the person. Whatever you need as a reminder to have as a sort of faith, you know, I think we talked about that. We touched upon that. Whatever you
Mm-hmm.
need to come back into that faith orientation, then do that. But
Yeah.
ultimately, if you start from the outside first, you start from a book or somebody else's preaching first, and
Yeah.
try to get that truth from the outside per se, it doesn't work like that. But if you do start with the inside, do the inner work from yourself, have that direct realization, and approach the scripture after that, then I think it can be actually very useful ultimately to remind oneself of their innate divinity.
Yes. Yeah. Beautifully said.
Mm.
Yeah.
But it all comes down to us ultimately.
Yeah.
Like you have to do the work. Nobody else is going to do it for you. Nobody in a collared shirt that speaks well is going to do it for you. No podcast is going to do it for you. No book. Truly, we
Yes.
all have to go on this journey, on this path of unveiling the true self, one may say, all in our own accord.
I agree.
And
And
that
I
may seem
think
daunting.
this to me is where like I see this kind of resurgence of connection to the church. But what I'm seeing really is this connection to like Jesus-led movements, specifically Jesus-led movements where people are really like, Jesus is king. And this connection to as you said, idolizing someone as the perfect incarnation of God, and everyone else being like a lesser being to some degree. There's like a hierarchy there. What I think the kind of danger in that is that we're outsourcing our ability to know God to, again, something external, right? And there's a lack of sovereignty in that. If we're choosing to believe that our only ability to have communion with God is through another being, there's no sovereignty in that. We're not recognizing the truth of our own being. But I think also like, I don't know. I find it kind of curious. There's a lot of like attachment to, this is kind of where I find it a bit confusing. Like the Bible's word being definitive, like being actual gospel, right? And it's like, what I find kind of curious about that is the gospel was also written by men, per se, humans, who are innately, partly animal and therefore have an egoic consciousness and maybe even an agenda. How can we ever point to one doctrine, one thing as being truth? And this is where I see this movement. Like I've had several people in my personal network doing this 180 and going back to religion in a fierce way of kind of attaching to the Bible, attaching to Jesus. And to me, it's like a regression of like, so you're going to attaching to something that was ultimately formulated by humans, right? The Bible being a kind of an outpouring of human understanding and expression, and you're attaching to that as being the way rather than your own embodied experience. And that was the original point I wanted to get to. That I think it could easily cultivate a spiritual culture of bypassing. Of spiritual bypassing and avoiding doing shadow work. If we just all held this belief, like I'm innately wrong, I'm innately unworthy, and Jesus took all of it's like, come on, where's the accountability in that? Where's the responsibility for your own consciousness from the fact that you are an evolutionary being? It's like, this is where I see it can be helpful. Like I almost see Jesus as a bridge. Like when we're trying to understand the concept of God, it's so abstract. It's so intangible. It's something that cannot be, as we said, contained, defined. And so having a figure that we could say is the personification of that force makes understanding the frequency of the divine more tangible. So to me, like Jesus has become a bridge for people to access that frequency. And there's nothing wrong in that. As we've said, like if it connects a person to truth and to faith, that's great. But it's like at some point we have to take the training wheels off. And so when we use Jesus or even the Bible as part of our training, it's just recognizing that they are bridges to truth, and not the absolute truth in and of themselves. As
Mm-hmm.
Eckhart Tolle says, everything is just a finger pointing to the truth, everything in this material experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you've summarized it well in your experience. And just, this is a conversation I'm very curious about, purely because I've seen so many people in the spiritual community kind of doing this turn. And I also think that perhaps it's possible there is a lot out there in the non-physical realms that isn't pleasant, that can feel very, very dark. And I think that the two people that I knew that have gone down this particular route, I think connected with darkness. They were channels, and they connected with darkness, what we could perceive as darkness, possibly even what we might perceive as the demonic. And I think that scared them so much, this almost uncharted territory of the astral plane, that, as you said, religion is a framework, it's a system, it feels safe, we know it. And so it's almost like using, again, that frequency of like the faith in the system to get to a place of safety within ourselves. And that makes us actually spiritually much more resilient, even though at some point we need to learn to embody that ourselves without outsourcing it to a system.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah, it could be used as a sense of outsourcing. I like that word. And bypassing, like relying on Jesus as king. Like that makes sense. Yeah, I understand. Like it's good to have a personal example of somebody that is the perfect being per se, and he died for our sins per se, but that doesn't mean we give up the journey to perfection. I think that's where a lot of people get lost in it. It's like somehow in the rhetoric, he died for our sins, so God forgives all because he gave his one and only son to be sacrificed, so we don't have to become like him or saint like, because it's like what's the point if all of our sins are already forgiven? But that's not the word. That's the opposite of the word. That's not the true meaning of the gospel. I guess that my interpretation of it, and I believe this is the true interpretation of it, it's that if he was in the story, if he was or wasn't, either way, the story still holds. What I'm trying to say is, like, if he was a real being, if he wasn't, it doesn't really matter. His story is that he was the perfected being. He was the sinless being. And we have to follow him, not as an idol, but we follow in his footsteps. And that's how we become more godlike. We become, the adage, what would Jesus do? It's like, remember that at all times. And that's how we follow God. That's how we become the almost perfected being, even though if we started this whole thing, there is no perfection, right? We're always striving for perfection. Jesus is that, like, he is the example, right? But just don't use the example as somehow, some way along the years, we use the example as like, he's perfect, I'm never going to be at that. Thankfully, he was here to show us perfection, so he saved us in a way. Somehow it got like mixed up like that, and we do these weird rituals because of that. But it's like, no. The story is that, yeah, he was here. He showed us what perfection is, to give us a sort of lifestyle to attain this sense of perfection in our lives. It gives us like a eternal purpose to refine ourselves, refine our imperfections, to come into a state of perfection. Even though it might not ever be perfected, it gives us this, the Messiah, right, is this ideation of perfection, so that we always have something to live for in a way. There's always a sense of hope. Like that faith is not, it's like that, it's that faith is not some kind of outward faith that we attach to some kind of some ideal, something out there. It's inward faith that we find through Jesus's life. I think that's the true interpretation of it. So yeah, I'm going off on a little tangent here, but as long as somebody uses Jesus as a reflection for something in their own life, so for something that they can embody in their own life, that's what really matters.
Yeah.
Once we get lost in, he was the Son of God, he was perfect, I can't be perfect, then you're missing the point.
Yeah.
Missing the point. And it's funny because it may seem contradictory. Like, if perfection can truly not be achieved, what's the point in chasing perfection, right? It's like, no, it's actually not like that. It's somehow, I don't know how better to describe it. It's like, yeah, even though perfection may not be something that we get to, like a point, like, oh, I am the perfected being, it doesn't mean we don't strive for that. Like there's still like this sense of striving for perfection, but it's like striving without the attachment for striving too. It's also like, it's effortless. I don't know how to explain it. It's like, that's the way to like find the sense of peace in life, I feel like, is by refining our character, by becoming that more angelic like being, by kind of growing out of the animalistic instinct. And yeah, I don't know. I'm going off on a little rant here. Sorry, but it's
no, I get it.
It's all about just following in Jesus's footsteps and not even Jesus, anybody, any guru, right? Any teacher. It's not holding them as being better or higher. It's just as an example for us, always come back in. It's all about personal accountability in this whole thing.
Yes.
Come back into the heart. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. And that, I feel, is going to be that's the big journey that I think humanity has to make in order to become spiritually mature. It's to take responsibility, because I think we have been conditioned to outsource responsibility to our governments, to a guru, to a system, to a way of thinking or being. And we've then in that state of doing that become kind of perpetually identified with being the victim, with being the martyr, with being in some kind of degree of, like separation or hierarchy or whatever you want to say. And so it's like this spiritual maturation process is, for me, in my personal experience, really about taking accountability for our consciousness. And actually, for me, that was how I moved out of what we would label as depression. And that's what kind of the mainstream labels as depression. What shifted 10 years of a very kind of chronic and insidious experience with my own consciousness was to recognize that on some level, I was still choosing to believe it. I was still choosing to believe the narrative of depression, that it was hopeless, right? If you think about like the story of depression, it's hopeless. There's nothing's going to change. Like, I feel empty, blah, blah, blah. These are all still stories, which when we think them enough and we feel them enough, they feel very compelling, but they're still stories. They're still programs. There's still limitations, right? And so it's like, we have to, when we're dealing with something like depression, we have to be able to cultivate the level of awareness to be able to see beyond that compelling paradigm and to take responsibility for the fact that on some level we're still investing in it if we feel that.
Yeah.
And that's what really liberated me.
Yeah. Wow. That's what it's all about. It's finding some kind of personal sense of sovereignty.
Yeah.
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 Wow.
Rich stuff.
Good stuff.
Rich,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been talking for a while. This is
Whoa, it's 7. Holy moly. It's like 2 hours. Yeah. 2 hours. I was thinking like maybe it's 6, 7 o'clock here.
Yeah, it's these things are a very meditative experience.
Yeah.
Transcending time.
100%.
Oh man. Yeah, so I don't know what we can conclude. I guess it's all about, we all got our own journey to this thing. It's all about going within ourselves, finding that sense of that little kernel of truth, and then truly embodying that truth in the best way possible in the world, and especially for our own being, for our own sense of sanity and peace and happiness in this life. But I believe we're all capable of it. Every single human being is capable of finding that essence of love, that essence of God within, and ultimately becoming anew and becoming I was gonna say better person. I don't know if better, there's no better or worse, but I guess it is a sense of betterment,
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, do you have anything else you want to say? Any last words for the pod? I think we can wrap this thing up.
Yeah, I would echo what you said, that this thing is all about love, and really just in the spaces in between where we don't feel connected to that truth, being consistent with our efforts to connect to it, even when it's not the embodied experience, right? And like, for me, this is the message that I would leave on with regards to the world we're entering into, like this new age that's unfolding, where things I think are going to feel very tumultuous at the material level. what is going to keep us afloat, I think, individually and collectively, is orientating ourselves towards love, truth, faith, even in moments when we can't directly contact them. And you know, as we said, with personal accountability and personal responsibility, like what I found on my own journey is that much of what we're doing really is just reparenting ourselves. It's like we are actually trying to, instead of outsourcing our ability to feel loved and safe to actual parents, we are becoming the holding chamber for our own like pure self, if you like.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how can we, as during this kind of really intense awakening process, like how can we continue to make loving choices for ourselves, even when at times we're not going to want to? And it's the discipline of that. And as someone that's been historically really undisciplined and historically really like scattered with my energy and not good with structure, like being able to cultivate consistency, discipline, dedication, devotion in our day-to-day lives to the things that are truly nourishing beyond like the instant gratification of like a chocolate bar or a bubble bath. It's like deeper love, what's deeply nourishing, as you said, for our spiritual hygiene. Like at the beginning of this podcast, you said, like, what can we input that's going to be more nourishing so that our output is more impactful, effective, loving? It's like really just orientating ourselves towards truly nourishing inputs, whatever that looks like for the individual. And it's going to be different for everyone. Yeah. And I would just, you know, for anyone that's in that evolutionary space now who feels like, whoa, it's challenging being a human, like continue with the nourishing, loving inputs in a truly meaningful way for yourself. And you will slowly begin to make your way back to contact with that loving space.
Well said. Well said. Yeah. It's about a deeper devotion.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Bhakti yoga. That feels like my path, the path of devotion in some form or another. And I think that many people I connect with, perhaps even yourself, feel that devotion to love, devotion to truth.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Thank you, Gary. It's
devotion.
To me, like this is what it's all about, right? It's about these, like, really being like stewards of this consciousness, being like and pioneers of this consciousness. Like each and every one of us has the potential to do that. And it's like, this is just what, when I connect with beings like yourself and other people on this path, it just reinvigorates me to remember, like, yeah, this is why we're here. Like in our own small way. Yeah. Love it. Thank you so much. It's been beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely a beautiful time. Oh man, yeah, I appreciate your time, effort, and wisdom that you brought to this conversation.
Yours.
Yeah, appreciate anybody that listened this long.
Yeah. Shout out to you guys.
Yeah, shout out. You're a real one if you listen this long. Yeah, let's keep on keeping on. Keep on being these pioneers, these servants, these stewards of love, right? Servants of love. Yes. Servants of love. I wouldn't want it any other way.
Yeah. That's what we're here for. It's the good stuff.
It's the good stuff. Well, yeah, thank you, Natasha. I appreciate you. Keep on doing your thing. You're definitely a wise one. You're a real one. Don't have anything else to say.
Yeah, I echo that sentiment back to you. Thank you for having me. And thank you to everyone that was listening.
For sure. Peace and love. Peace and love, everybody.
Bye.